Hi everyone. I want to welcome you all to Microsoft Teams Tips and Tricks. My name is Saranya Yogaraja. I'm a senior program manager here at Microsoft. I'm from the Teams Customer Experience Group. And today's session is for those of you who are familiar with the fundamentals of Microsoft Teams and you want to take Teams to the next level. Now, let's take a look at our agenda for this session and what we will be covering off. The aim of this session is really to optimize Teams and take it to the next level. I'm hoping that some of you were able to attend the Microsoft Teams Fundamentals course. It's called Getting Started with Teams. That session really sets the stage for what we will be covering off in this call. You'll notice that as you start to use Teams more and more, there's a lot going on in the platform, right? But we're going to start by looking at ways to ensure that your messages are amplified and it gets the visibility you're looking for. Then we'll dig into some best practices on organizing teams and channels. Some of the feedback that we've heard from customers is that they really don't know what channels to create, when to use the general channel versus creating a custom one. So we're going to speak to all of that as well. And then lastly, we'll look into how you can organize items in teams as a whole so things don't feel so cluttered about, you feel in control of all of the content that's coming in. I just want to make a note that some of the content that I will be presenting here today, you may have already seen in our Getting Started with Microsoft Teams class, but I'm going to dig into these actions a little bit more in detail to emphasize the importance of these tips and how they can help you optimize Teams in your day-to-day. And finally, of course, I will provide you with some next steps and resources in case you have any follow-up questions after today's session. And with that, let's get started. So I'm going to start by focusing in on chat and messaging. Very quickly, a chat can be a one-to-one private chat. It can be a message in a group chat, so with more than two individuals. And of course, there's channel conversations, so conversations that take place in teams and channels. So three different ways that you can actually go about chatting in teams. Because Microsoft Teams is a chat-based workspace, chatting can be used for a variety of reasons, as you see here. And there's a lot of conversations that are taking place. So you really need to know how to make your chat messages stand out from the rest in order to get the visibility, the feedback that you're looking for. So of course, one of the first ways that you can go about doing that is to format your message. Formatting your message makes your message stand out to your recipients. It's a clean, easy way to get your point across in a concise manner. If you think about those chat conversations that you have today, and I do this all the time, particularly when I'm using my mobile phone, I might send one sentence at a time, and your recipient may get 5+ messages in a row. That really doesn't emphasize your point. It clutters up the chat window, right? But with formatting, you can emphasize your most important points. You can add a subject or a title to give that message a little bit more context into what you're talking about. You can even add bullet points or links within that conversation. At a minimum, the best tip I can provide here is to add a subject to your channel conversations. Teams and channels in particular, they're filled with a lot of content and oftentimes a lot of people. You can't really operate the same way chatting in teams and channels as you would a one-to-one or group chat. So keep those conversations, those messages clean and concise by formatting them, adding a subject to give folks context into what you're talking about. Another way you can get your message across is to ensure that you are tagging your intended recipient. At mentioning ensures that the person that you have at mentioned receives an alert in their activity feed that they have a message directly meant for them. Oftentimes, when I log into Teams very early on in the morning, I go through my activity feed. One of the first things I do is just to quickly scan to see if I have anything directly needing my attention. This is an incredibly easy way to get people's attention in Teams. And of course, the way you at mention folks is to simply type in the at sign and start typing in that person's name. Also note that you can at mention teams and channels as well. So if you want the entire team or channel to take a look at something urgently, you can directly call them out as well. So a big tip here, if you are in a group chat or channel conversation, so anything apart from a one-to-one or private chat, I would recommend using @mentions there. When you're in a group chat or channel conversation, your brain may be wired to kind of tune out all of that noise automatically, but you want to ensure you're paying attention when someone really needs you directly. So @mentioning, it's a great way to go about doing that. Next up, keep your conversations fun. I know we all take our jobs very seriously, but every now and then it's nice to just keep ourselves engaged and lighthearted by adding some graphics and some humor. This really started with the basic emoticons, right? The smiley face, some basic icons, but we've really evolved this to GIFs and memes and some stickers that you can actually customize with your own content. Just one note here, please don't go too overboard with this. It's certainly fun every once in a while, but you don't want to get your entire conversation bombarded with just a series of memes and GIFs back and forth. That can get a little distracting to others. Another simple way to reinforce a point, and this is really encouraging to your coworkers or your colleagues, you can add a like or a +1 to what they are saying. Liking confirms that you've received their message and you agree with that point. My team is really great at doing this in particular whenever our manager posts something to our entire team. Every single one of us acknowledges that we've received her message or read it by adding a like to her message. It's a great way to show that you are participating, that you are active in teams. Moving forward, and this is a big tip here, please look before you reply. In a threaded conversation, folks oftentimes make the mistake of starting a brand new conversation when they actually intended on responding to an existing thread. I can guarantee that we have all been guilty of doing this at some point, and it's because we are so quick, so used to using the type message bar down here at the very bottom as opposed to the reply to thread. It's important that you keep an eye on this because you want to ensure that the threaded conversation is flowing smoothly and that conversation, that topic, is persistent. Starting a new message as opposed to responding to the existing thread, it breaks that persistency and makes it a very broken experience. So just take a second here, ensure that you're responding to the thread in the most appropriate area. And my last tip for you when it comes to amplifying chatting and conversations, and this is something that many people really don't know about, you can actually connect an email thread into a Teams channel conversation. How cool is that? One of the questions that I was previously asked in our Getting Started with Microsoft Teams session is there was a gentleman who wanted to increase Teams adoption, but his team always reverted back to using an email thread. He wanted to know if there was a way to retain those conversations in Teams. Well, you can actually get a copy of your email conversations embedded into your Teams channel. So you can continue the conversations in the channel as opposed to having the back and forth email threads. And I'm going to show you exactly what this looks like in the live demonstration. But essentially, it's a few simple steps. You take a look at these three little dots, these ellipses, next to your channel name. And once you click on that, you can obtain an email address for this specific channel. And in your email, you add the channel email address as a recipient and simply press send. And that entire email conversation, it will get embedded into your channel as an attachment. And any future replies to that email, so long as it has that email address from your channel, it will actually automatically show up in Teams as well. How cool is that? So not a lot of people know about this feature. I'm going to jump into the Teams client right now, walk you through how you would go about doing this and some of the other tips that we've walked through thus far. So I'm in the Teams client right now, and I'm going to go ahead into the Teams and Channels section. So for the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to pick any random channel here. And I'll take the marketing assets channel here in the marketing team. And again, I'm going to click on these three little dots, these ellipses. And if I click on these, you'll notice the option here to get email address. And once you click on this, you'll see an email address that's automatically generated for this particular channel. So if I copy this email address and I go ahead and I open a new email thread here, And if you have an existing one, of course, that works as well because you want to carry those conversations over in Teams. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to use a new email thread here. Test email conversations in Teams. So I have that channel as a recipient. I'm going to click send right here. And it really is that simple, that straightforward. And that message, you'll notice in just a few seconds, it will actually show up as a message in this conversation, in this channel. Take a look, that message that I just sent. Okay. It's retained as an attachment in this message. This ensures that you don't lose the information that you had in the email threads back and forth. You're simply just continuing that conversation in Teams. And again, instead of starting a brand new conversations about that topic, I will of course click on the reply instead. So that conversation stays consistent, stays persistent, as opposed to that broken up experience. And you'll notice here, it stops the back and forth in email because it ensures that that conversation continues on in Teams. Okay. A couple of other things to note about this particular feature. So say I go back to these three little dots here, these ellipses, and get email address, you'll notice the option to see some advanced settings. If you click into that, take a look. It allows you to customize who can send emails into this channel. So say you're a support organization and you have emails going back and forth with your customers, but you want to continue those conversations internally with your support team, you can do just that. You can track those conversations in Teams. So very cool feature, very easy to use. It's a great way to increase your team's adoption. And very briefly, I want to go through some of the other tips that we walk through about chatting and conversations. And most of them are pretty straightforward, so I won't spend too much time on this. Again, we already talked about the difference between starting a new conversation as opposed to that reply to thread. To format your message, of course, you can click on the format icon and you have a lot more options here. You can add a subject, you can add some test conversations, some options for formatting your message. You can bold, you can, of course, highlight, you can mark this as urgent if you want to. You can even add a quote here if you want to. A lot of options here. I actually spoke about this with my coworker Debbie the other day. When Debbie adds a link to a website here, she goes ahead and she copies and pastes that entire URL. And this might seem a very long, messy URL to add into a message, but you can actually embed a link to text and make it look a little bit cleaner. So for instance, and what I mean by that, if I add um, some text here and I go into the link, insert link option, I can add a link, pretty straightforward. Insert. So instead of having a long URL into your message, you can just add a URL to some text here that will keep your messages looking a little bit cleaner. Okay. This is really just to keep your message less busy with a long URL, particularly if you're crafting a longer message. Couple of other tips that we talked about. You can, of course, reinforce some of the messages that your participants have sent by going in, clicking, and liking that message if you'd like. It's a good way to acknowledge that you've received it. And you can keep these messages fun. Of course, GIFs and memes. You have emoticons here. You have GIFs and memes as well. You can even have stickers that you can customize. And these GIFs and memes change every day. They're really entertaining. Take a look, play around, get to know, engage your coworkers more by leveraging these. Coming back to my presentation right now. So I'm going to switch gears right now a little bit and talk to you about how to optimize teams and channels. So we always get asked, how do you even start by creating a team? What are some of the things that we should really be thinking about? We can think about a team the same way we think about a house. The overall foundation of the team should be your team's objectives. So start thinking strategically about your overall goals, what projects you have coming up, the work that will be involved. If it's a small project, it won't last very long. Does it even warrant a team? or can it be carried out in a group chat? Do you have conversations about a project going on in email that really should be in Teams so you can increase collaboration? Take a look at your existing projects, see if they would be better suited as a team or channel, and carry on those conversations in Teams, just like we walked through earlier in our previous section by migrating those conversations from email threads into your channel conversations. Take a look to see if there's already a team or channel that exists that covers what you need to do. There's no point in having redundant teams putting that same information in two places. That really confuses your team members and makes things a little messy. Establish naming conventions for your team. If you see a pattern, stick to that pattern, make it consistent. If not, if you're responsible for creating all of the teams, create a standard for others so they can easily follow along, find the appropriate team for them. And if you are responsible for creating a team, please don't be the only team owner. Assign management permissions of that team to another resource or two to make sure that you have a backup. And lastly, be mindful of creating different teams with the same people. Do you really need a different team, or do you just need a new channel within that team? Or should you have just made that team name generic enough to cover all the topics or initiatives that you're working on with the same group? So please be mindful of that. Some things to consider when you're creating your team and setting up that foundation for your house. Channels. So channels are there to help guide you to specific topics, right? So you can think about channels as separate rooms in your house. You have the dining room for eating dinner, right? You have the living room for reading, watching TV, and so on. So when you buy a house, you have an idea of what you're going to do in each of these rooms, right? And then maybe down the line, you're comfortable in your house and you think, oh, you know what? We need another room for just family time. So you need a family room and you work towards building that out. Channels operate the same way, so keep it to the basics for now. Don't create a bunch of channels thinking folks will use all of them appropriately. What you envision will work may not work with the style of your team at the beginning. Not every conversation warrants its own team, and not every conversation warrants a channel. So start off with just a few channels, see how the conversations are flowing. If the topic is popular enough, then create a separate channel for it. On our team, and we've run into this case a lot, we have long threaded conversations, and someone responds at the end saying, hey, I'm creating a new channel for this topic so we can carry on those conversations from there. And with the general channel, so we always get asked, what do we use the general channel for as opposed to other channels? So general channels are good to provide high level overviews of what the team is about. It's good for new member onboarding or broad team announcements. My manager, for instance, whenever she has a team announcement about travel and expense updates, for instance, she usually posts it in the general channel for all of us to take a look. So establish a high level structure up front, see how things are going to modify accordingly. Teams and channels are pretty flexible, so figure out the style that works with your teams. And of course, the way you can add a team is to click on these three little dots again, these ellipses for additional options, and you can select add channel from there. And everyone within that team, they will have access to that new channel that's created. The best way to optimize your team and channel, of course, start leveraging tabs. Tabs are there to help get easy access to key information and key tools. So oftentimes I find myself going into the same file in a channel or conversation, not realizing that I can easily just embed that file as a tab at the top of my conversation or my channel. This helps bring visibility to key resources, helps keep everyone in that conversation aligned. And this is particularly true with tabs in a channel. We briefly walked through this in our Getting Started with Teams class, but again, to add a tab in a channel is simply by clicking on this plus button and adding all of the relevant content for your conversation. So tabs in particular are crucial with project work. So when you think about reports, when you think about tools that are important for your project, it's really all about consolidating everything you need for that project in one place. So your project team doesn't have to go everywhere else looking for that information. You can be on the same page together in one team and channel. Now, I want to switch gears once again to talk to you about optimizing meetings. So, meetings are a big part of people's work lives. It constitutes approximately 30% of work time for some folks. There's a lot of preparation that goes into making a meeting and following up required after the meeting takes place. So, it's really that end to end meeting experience, right? Take a look at the image that's on the screen. In Teams, only a couple of these actions actually take place during the call, the meeting itself. A lot of them occur before the meeting and after the meeting takes place. So I want to walk you through how to really optimize meetings in Teams to take advantage of all of the features that are available to you. So when you create the meeting, the single or recurring meeting, or a channel meeting invite, even before the meeting starts, start chatting with participants. Share your agenda, share the files that you're going to discuss during the call. This really helps prepare your meeting attendees on what's to come. Have those pre-meeting conversations to get the ball rolling. As you can see here, to click to chat with participants, there's a direct button that takes you to that. When you are in the call itself, so this again is the in-meeting experience, leverage those meeting controls to record your meeting, to share your application, to collaborate on your documents in real time. Take meeting notes, capture comments and questions in the chat window itself as the meeting is going on. So don't just use the meeting itself as a call. Take advantage of the tools at your disposal to get the most out of your meeting experience. And when the meeting is done, don't stop there. Continue that conversation. You'll notice that this is the chat that is carried throughout this meeting. So here I can assign action items. I can ask more questions if I want to. I can follow up on meeting topics. And of course, I can access that recording here as well. So there's no need to start a new thread, have a separate group chat for the same discussions on these topics. I can do so using the Teams meeting experience. Okay. And you'll notice here that this is a channel meeting, and this is a channel meeting example. This meeting experience takes place within a channel. Everything within that channel is organized in this one area for your project. It's very easy, very convenient to manage. Okay. Now I'm going to switch gears once further to talk to you all about organization in Teams. So as you start to use Teams more and more, you'll notice content and conversations are getting busier and busier, right? The amount of information we receive, that noise coming in, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So between chat and channel conversations and meetings and tools, it may feel a little bit daunting to keep track and feel that sense of control that you want. But with the right approach, you can really find that balance. You can obtain that sense of organization and control. First things first, play favorites to keep your information front and center. You can favorite a contact, you can favorite a team, you can favorite a channel to make them more visible to you so you have easy access to them. You may have a lot of teams and a lot of different channels, for instance, and I can't emphasize enough how much order it will bring your life to favorite the most relevant information to you and minimize the rest of that content. If someone really needs your attention in a team that you have not favorited, they can mention you to get your attention and reinforce that action. And you can also take a look at the activity that's going on in the activity feed. So there's no need to worry about missing relevant information here. One additional way to minimize the noise is to mute conversations when you need to focus. So muting prevents notifications coming in for that particular chat so you can really focus in on your work. You can also hide conversations if they're not really active for you. When you hide a conversation, it removes that conversation from your content list view. But if there is activity that occurs in that conversation, it will reappear in your content list. So don't worry, you're not going to miss any information that's going on. And also a caveat, hiding a conversation does not mean that you are deleting that conversation. It removes it from your view, but that history of that conversation, it will definitely remain there. And I'll show you what I mean by that when we go into the live demonstration for this. One way to keep your conversations organized, you can name your group conversations. This will help highlight the topic of that conversation. So when you really need to search for it, you can easily find it. You can resume your activity from there. This is also beneficial when you have similar people in the same conversations and viewing just a list of people that doesn't really differentiate the topic of that conversation, right? But with naming that conversation, you know exactly what you're talking about, so you can easily reference it. And of course, to rename that group chat, you simply click on the little pencil icon next to the group chat participants' names, and you can rename it as appropriate. And you can continue renaming it if the topic changes. You can do all of that as well as many times as you need. Okay. Next up, so there's a convenient way that you can search for information. So if you recall, the search bar in Teams, it's quite robust. There's a lot you can do there. You can not only search for a contact, but you can look for keywords, you can look for files, and so on. What a lot of folks don't know is that you can actually narrow in on your searches by leveraging the forward slash key. And there's several different options there that are available to you to help narrow in on your search. And this is only just a snippet of those options. When you'll actually see the full list when we get into the live demonstration. But this will help guide your search criteria and save you a lot of time. You can find contacts, you can find specific files here. You can even set your status here. You can search for a team. You can go right into that team instead of searching for it in your content list view in the teams and channels menu. So a lot of different options to narrow in on the key activities that you're looking for. Highly recommend you start using these quick search keys. And very similarly, you can narrow in on the activity that is happening in your activity feed. So the activity feed, it's always active. There's always content popping up there. So you really want to key in on the information that's relevant to you. So if you click on the funnel icon in the activity feed, you can see the filters to narrow in on your search. And this is particularly relevant when you want to search for those app mentions, those messages directly meant for you. Uh, or those replies to the messages that you've sent out. So really start leveraging the activity feed to filter out on the content that is relevant to you. And lastly, and this again, this is one of the most underrated or underused features in Teams. Not a lot of people know about this feature. You can actually save messages in Teams. You can bookmark them so you can return to them. This is a great way to have a to-do list of sorts in Teams so you can get back to those tasks, those messages if you need to revisit them. And the way to go about doing that is when you're in your message, you can click on the bookmark or save icon, and that will highlight that message. And to access those messages again, you go into your profile and click on the saved option, and that will give you the full list of all of the messages that you've saved. Now, let's walk into the live demonstration right now to show you some of these tips that we've walked through so far. So I'm back here in the Teams client. I'll go through what we just walked through right now, and that's saving a message. So to save a message, again, you go into that message and you click on this tiny little bookmark, this save icon, and you'll notice that it has highlighted that message as saved. And to access that message again, you just simply go into your profile and click on the saved messages drop down here, and you'll get a full list of all of those messages that you've saved. So it's a great way to have a to-do list of the items that you need to action or you need to review once further. Okay, great. So I referenced the search field and narrowing in on your search activity. So take a look. If I go into the search bar right now, I click on the forward slash key. Take a look at how many options there are. There are so many different options on how you can narrow in on your search. For example, if I wanted to see the activity that my coworker Alex has been up to, I can go ahead, I can click on Alex, and it takes me directly to the activity that he's been working on. And he unfortunately hasn't been working on anything in Teams. It's been a little inactive here. Okay, so explore all of the different search options. There's a lot that you can do with the search bar here. I actually leveraged this the other day when my senior director sent a message in a team. I wanted to find that message very easily, so I searched for his recent activity and I was able to find it that way. Same thing for the activity feed. So if I go into the activity feed and I wanted to filter in on the messages there, I can go ahead, I can click on the funnel icon and I can narrow in on your search from there. So the activity feed is activity that is directly relevant to you as opposed to the search bar. That's just a list of all of the content that's going on in Teams. So go ahead, leverage each accordingly as you want. So favoriting is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So if you go into a team or a channel here, and I can click on the team or channel, this one is already marked as one of my favorites. If I go into another team and channel that hasn't been marked as a favorite, if I go into the water cooler talk, for instance, I can click on the star icon, and that will mark it as a favorite. Okay. And lastly, hiding a chat. So when you go to hide a chat, if I'm going to the chat menu option right now, if I wanted to hide a chat, I click into these three little dots again, these ellipses, and I click on hide. Take a look, it removes that chat from the content list, so it helps keep that content list pretty clean, but it does not delete that chat with that individual. So if I wanted to go ahead and talk to Alex again, take a look. It brings back that chat conversation, that entire chat history with Alex. It has been retained. Okay, and to unhide, I just click on the menu options again in the ellipses here, and I click on unhide, and that will retain his chat conversation in the content list. Okay. So I really hope you learned a few new ways to leverage Teams in your day-to-day with these new tips. I'm going to come back to my presentation here. So there's no need to make things super complicated. There's a lot of basic stuff that I've showed here today. Start with the most basic small stuff. Rename a group chat. Give that chat a little bit more context. Send out a meeting invite in a meeting chat with participants. Chat with them before the call takes place. Pin a document that you reference a lot in a message or a channel. It's these small ways, these additional ways that you can certainly leverage Teams to the best of its ability and make it more suitable for you to do your work. Some resources that I can provide you following this call. We, of course, have additional training available at aka.ms/teams training. There's also some additional tips and tricks on that site, so take a look at that. If you want some more detail on your Teams deployment, take a look at Success with Teams. It has a lot of information there. And if you do have a question, you have no idea where to go about asking it, take a look at our Teams community site at aka.ms/Teams community. So we have a lot of folks internal to Microsoft on that site. They're on that site regularly, making sure that your questions get answered. And we have a lot of avid Teams users taking a look at that site as well. So please take advantage of their expertise. And of course, we do have some additional training material. This is just one step up from the foundations course I mentioned earlier, getting started with Microsoft Teams. If you are managing a Skype for Business to Teams upgrade, I encourage you to take a look at our Upgrade 101 course, as well as the Making a Switch course, Making a Switch from Skype for Business to Teams. This is an end user course. It gives you a good side-by-side comparison view of the Skype for Business interface and the Teams interface and how you would manage some of the core activities in each. And with that, I want to thank you all for attending today's training session. I'm going to bring our session to an end. I really hope you found some valuable information here that you can start using in your day-to-day with Teams. So again, thank you very much for joining today's session. I hope to see you all in another training session soon.